In this video, we're going to analyze the pronunciation of a subscriber, Kimberly. Here's the information she's provided about herself. She's from the Washington, D.C. metro area of the United States, and she first started studying Spanish about 20 years ago when she was in high school. At that time, she took 3 years of classes followed by a summer immersion program in Spain. After that, she stopped studying Spanish for over a decade and only picked it up again about 6 years ago. Now she studies on her own. She speaks it at work primarily with Central Americans, and she speaks it with her best friend, who's Peruvian. One of her New Year's resolutions this year was to reduce her foreign accent to the point where her heritage would not be immediately obvious to native listeners. All right, first I'll describe the most salient features of Kimberly's Spanish pronunciation to prepare your ears. Then we'll listen to her recording, and then I'll give some recommendations for how she can improve her pronunciation. At the end, I'll give her pronunciation a numerical rating. Things Kimberly does well. Kimberly's pronunciation is good. Although she has a foreign accent, she's easy to understand at all times. Number 1, tapped and trilled R. Kimberly's R's are one of the best features of her Spanish accent. In this recording, she pronounced both tapped and trilled R's accurately. Since R's are sounds that are very different between Spanish and English, pronouncing them well this consistently is a big deal. Listen for her to trill R in words like rápidas, raíces, and agarró. Listen for her to tap R in words like pero, era, and para. And listen for her to pronounce R's at the ends of syllables and words with varying degrees of trill. All very nice. Number 2, velar fricative. Kimberly's velar fricative sounds really nice, better than I remember hearing from a native English speaker in a long time. And she's very consistent with it. Listen for her to pronounce these words like lejos, justo, debajo, viejo, and magia. Number 3, vowel quality. Kimberly was pretty consistent in pronouncing vowels with accurate vowel quality. She has certain English language stress patterns that affect her vowels that we'll talk about in a minute. But generally speaking, she pronounces her vowels accurately. This is a big deal for an English speaker because the English vowel system is so different from the Spanish vowel system. Now let's talk about some areas where Kimberly could stand to make some improvement. Number 1, PT and K. In English, the PT and K phonemes are pronounced explosively, and in some positions they're accompanied by an aspiration. The Spanish equivalents of the PT and K phonemes are simple stops. They're pronounced with much less muscular tension, less explosiveness, and no aspiration. In this recording, Kimberly pronounces P and K just like the English versions, and T much like the English version. More on T in a moment. Listen for her to pronounce casa like casa, papel like papel, and perfectamente like perfectamente. Number 2, point of articulation of T. English T is articulated with the tip of the tongue here on the alveolar ridge. Spanish T is articulated with the tip of the tongue way down here near the incisal edge of the upper front teeth. And while you may not think it makes that big of a difference where you put your tongue, it does change the sound quality and affects your accent. Kimberly doesn't quite pronounce T with her tongue here, but she also doesn't pronounce it with her tongue here. She's somewhere in between, but often leaning toward the English pronunciation. Number 3, reduction of unstressed vowels. In English, unstressed vowels tend to be reduced in one way or another. With regard to vowel quality, they may be reduced in pronunciation to the neutral vowel sound With regard to duration, they're often shortened, which changes the rhythm of the word, and they may be combined with liquid consonants, making the consonant the nucleus of the syllable. While Kimberly normally pronounces her vowels very well, she does reduce unstressed a to schwa in most instances. Listen for her to pronounce volvía like volvía, ortigas like ortigas, and cositas like cositas. She also pronounces vieran like vieran, and terriblemente like terriblemente. And she frequently reduces the duration of unstressed vowels, giving her speech English-style stress-timed rhythm. Number 4, interdental fricative D. In English, both plosive and tap D are pronounced with the tip of the tongue way up here on the alveolar ridge. Most instances of Spanish D are interdental fricatives, pronounced with the tip of the tongue between the upper and lower front teeth, like the TH in English words like weather and clothing. In certain limited phonetic contexts, Spanish D is pronounced with the tip of the tongue low on the back of the upper front teeth. Spanish D is never pronounced like the English D, with the tip of the tongue up here. In this recording, Kimberly sometimes pronounced Spanish D as an interdental fricative, but she often pronounced Ds that should have been fricative as a dental stop, as an alveolar stop, and sometimes as an alveolar tap. So she pronounced podía and todo correctly, but she pronounced mecedoras like mecedoras, and uno de sus pies like uno de sus pies, and she pronounced todas direcciones like todas direcciones, and tenido like tenido. So Kimberly has made a start in changing her English D to Spanish D, but she still has some work to do. Number 5, the ND combination. As I just described, Spanish D is never pronounced with the tip of the tongue here on the alveolar ridge. Never. While students can be made to understand this concept intellectually, it can sometimes be hard to get them to quit doing it. With the ND consonant combination, in Spanish both the N and D are pronounced with the tongue on the back of the upper front teeth. This diacritic is used to specify this dental pronunciation. Most phoneticians ignore these diacritics unless it's necessary to specify the point of articulation, and I leave them out in most of my transcriptions. I include this one here because I really want to emphasize the point. Even when they pronounce other Spanish Ds correctly, native English speakers have the tendency to articulate both the N and the D in the ND combination with the tongue on the alveolar ridge. Listen to these words pronounced first with the stereotypical English alveolar pronunciation, then with more accurate Spanish dental pronunciation. Corriendo, corriendo, cuando, cuando, volando, volando, pasando, pasando, hundiendo, hundiendo. In this recording, Kimberly consistently pronounced the ND combination with alveolar articulation. Number 6, the RD combination. Kimberly struggled to pronounce the D in the RD combination, and again I think this has to do with her tongue position with the D. Since the R in this combination is articulated on the alveolar ridge, it's relatively tricky to immediately follow it with an English-style alveolar D. So I think her difficulty is that she's trying to pronounce the D in this combination as an alveolar D. Number 7, double L and Y like English Y. Most dialects of Spanish pronounce the double L and Y like some version of a voiced palatal fricative, y. And no authentic natural Spanish dialect not influenced by English pronounces double L and Y just like English Y in all of its various allophones. In this recording, Kimberly pronounced Spanish double L and Y pretty much just like English Y. Listen for her to pronounce llevaría like llevaría, cayó like cayó, llorar like llorar, and aquella like aquella. Number 8, the letter V as the labiodental fricative, v. In Spanish, the letter V is pronounced exactly the same as the letter B. They are the same phoneme. In this recording, Kimberly pronounced the letter V as the labiodental v, just as you would in English. So she pronounces llevaría a cabo like llevaría a cabo, sin que lo vieran like sin que lo vieran, atravesó volando like atravesó volando, and como se revolvían like como se revolvían. Number 9, split diphthongs. There were several places where Kimberly pronounced what should have been a diphthong as two separate syllables. Listen for her to pronounce vio as vio, se abrió like se abrió, desaparecieron like desaparecieron, and se hubiera like se hubiera. She did this a couple of times in her personal story as well, and always with diphthongs starting with I. It seems that what she's doing is pronouncing the I as the vowel E instead of the glide Y, bio instead of bio. Alright, in addition to these areas I've described in detail, Kimberly made some errors that I think were less obtrusive. She sometimes pronounced approximate B and G as hard B and G. She used glottal stops in several places. She pronounced final O with English-style vowel quality a few times. She pronounced English-style L a few times, and she voiced consonants that shouldn't be voiced. Compared to other features of her accent, I feel that these are less immediate concerns, and she should focus her attention on the things we went over in more detail. Alright, with that discussion to prepare our ears, let's listen to Kimberly's recording. As we listen and read along, each time she pronounces something in a way that falls into one of the categories we've just discussed, I'll highlight it so you can better understand what I'm talking about. Alright, here goes.
Un momento más tarde, James volvía hacia la casa corriendo cuanto podía. Llevaría a cabo toda la operación en la cocina. Pensó si conseguía entrar sin que lo vieran la tía Sponge y la tía Spiker. Estaba terriblemente excitado. Atravesó volando, más que corriendo, la alta hierba y las ortigas, sin preocuparse de sus picaduras, y a lo lejos vio a la tía Sponge y a la tía Spiker sentadas en sus mecedoras, de espaldas a él. Se desvió para evitarlas, con la intención de entrar por el otro lado de la casa, pero de pronto, justo cuando pasaba por debajo del viejo melocotonero que estaba en medio del jardín, uno de sus pies resbaló y cayó de bruces en la hierba. La bolsa de papel se abrió al golpear el suelo y las miles de cositas verdes se desparramaron en todas direcciones. James se puso a cuatro patas inmediatamente y empezó a buscar sus preciados tesoros. ¿Pero qué era lo que estaba pasando? Se estaban hundiendo en el suelo. Pudo ver perfectamente cómo se revolvían y retorcían al abrirse camino en la dura tierra, y sin pérdida de tiempo estiró la mano para agarrar algunos antes de que fuera demasiado tarde, pero desaparecieron justo debajo de sus dedos. Trató de agarrar otras, pero sucedió exactamente lo mismo. Empezó a gatear frenéticamente en un intento desesperado de agarrar las que todavía quedaban, pero fueron demasiado rápidas para él. Cada vez que las puntas de sus dedos estaban a punto de tocarlas, desaparecían en el interior de la tierra. Y pronto, en cuestión de segundos, todas sin excepción, habían desaparecido para siempre. A James le entraron ganas de echarse a llorar. Ya nunca podría recuperarlas. Las había perdido para siempre. Pero, ¿a dónde habrían ido? ¿Y por qué motivo habían tenido tanta prisa en meterse en la tierra de aquella forma? ¿Qué andarían buscando? Allá abajo no había nada excepto las raíces del viejo melocotonero y un montón de gusanos, 100 pies e insectos que habitaban en la tierra. ¿Qué era lo que había dicho el anciano? El primero que encuentren, ya sea microbio, insecto, animal o árbol, recibirá toda la magia. Cielo santo, pensó James, ¿qué va a pasar ahora si encuentran un gusano, o un 100 pies, o una araña? ¿Y qué pasará si llegan hasta las raíces del melocotonero? Triste y lentamente, el pobre James se levantó del suelo y se fue a la leñera. Oh, si no se hubiera caído y desparramado aquella maravillosa bolsa. Toda esperanza de una vida más feliz se había desvanecido. Hoy, mañana y el día siguiente y los otros días no habría más que castigos, dolor, infelicidad y desesperación. Agarró el hacha e iba a empezar a partir leña otra vez cuando oyó un grito a sus espaldas que le hizo detenerse y mirar. Hace 8 años fui de viaje a Italia con mi esposo. Siempre había querido ir y todo fue increíble. Fuimos a 5 ciudades durante los 10 días de nuestro viaje. Visitamos muchos sitios interesantes, incluso museos y catedrales, y aunque no sabemos mucho del arte, nos gustó mucho ver las obras famosas. Mi lugar favorito era la ciudad de Venecia, que es hermosa. Fue súper interesante ver todos los edificios construidos por encima del agua, y como no hay calles ni carros, todo el mundo pasa por la ciudad de pie o por los barcos. Se dice que no existe un mapa completo de la ciudad de Venecia, entonces allí pasamos muchas horas explorando la ciudad porque estábamos perdidos muy frecuentemente. No nos molestó estar perdidos porque así descubrimos cosas que tal vez no hubiéramos encontrado por otra manera. La cosa que más me gustó del viaje fue la comida. Toda era riquísima. Una noche que siempre voy a recordar Comimos en un restaurante que estaba ubicado en el lado de una montaña, con una vista espectacular del mar abajo. Algún día espero regresar a Italia para ver más de ese país.
All right, so what can Kimberly do to improve her pronunciation? I recommend that she read aloud in Spanish for 20 to 30 minutes a day, dedicating a whole week of study to each of the features I'm about to mention, one at a time. Number 1, D. I think improving pronunciation of D would improve Kimberly's accent more than any other single thing. Kimberly, please understand, Spanish D is pronounced as an interdental fricative, like the TH in the words weather and clothing, in almost every phonetic context, even in combination with other consonants. It's only pronounced as a dental stop in limited phonetic contexts, and it's never articulated with the tongue on the alveolar ridge. Pronouncing D like TH would also help you pronounce consonant clusters with D, in words like tarde, verde, and jardín that you struggle with. I have several videos where I describe pronunciation of D, as well as consonant combinations with D. I recommend that you watch them carefully. If you have any questions, please send me an email. Number 2, PT and K. I think the second most important thing Kimberly could do would be to stop pronouncing the PT and K phonemes plosive and aspirated as we do in English. Included in this would be to begin pronouncing Spanish T with the tongue low on the back of the upper front teeth. I have a whole video on this topic that I recommend watching. Number 3, stop reducing unstressed vowels. This one is incredibly important, but I don't know how to help people quit doing it. It's a deeply ingrained and yet totally subconscious feature of the English language that affects every multisyllabic word we speak as well as the overall rhythm of the English language. So how do you get people to quit doing it? Honestly, I don't know. The only thing I can think of is to make people aware that they do it and encourage them to read out loud slowly, paying attention to unstressed vowels and focusing on enunciating them fully. Hopefully, with self-awareness and corrective practice, they can learn to overcome it. Number 4, pronounce double L and Y as a palatal fricative. This is a really easy one to fix, but it'll make a huge difference. I have 2 videos on this subject that I recommend you watch. Number 5, pronounce V exactly as you pronounce B. This is a very easy change to make that will give your Spanish a much more authentic sound. I have a whole video on pronouncing V just like B, and I have a couple videos on how to pronounce the B phoneme. These are my main recommendations. Of course, I think you should correct everything you can, and there were a few other things that I mentioned. I have videos on each of those topics as well that I think you should watch and work on correcting those things too. Alright, so what numerical score would I give Kimberly? She's definitely better than this because she does way better than pronounce some Spanish sounds correctly. She's not at this level though because she doesn't pronounce all basic Spanish sounds accurately, and she doesn't yet apply correct Spanish phonology to many sounds. I think this is an accurate description of her Spanish. She pronounces most basic Spanish sounds correctly, but not all of them. And she's beginning to apply correct Spanish phonology, but just with a couple of sounds. So for this recording, I would give Kimberly a rating of 5. And this agrees well with how I think native listeners would perceive her pronunciation. Her pronunciation's easy to understand, but she has a foreign accent. Alright, if you've enjoyed this video or learned something from it, please give it a like and share it with a friend or two, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos.